As far as my traditional process, it was just the basic thumbnail, ink on, like I said, not 11 by 17, but certainly the same proportions. And then the biggest part of the process was just hating everything and everyone because I hated scanning. I hated erasing my pencils. I hated all of that stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Comics Cube. I am with John Amor of Urban Animal. What's up, John?
Hello. Hello,
Welcome
Max.
back. Welcome back. I'm
Good to
gonna,
see you, man.
gonna ask you a question. I
Mhm.
asked this to everyone. I did not ask you last time. What is it that you love about comics?
Oh, shit. Uh, I get asked this at like conventions and everything and stuff, and my answer is always the same, but I always end up phrasing it a different way. But I guess my favorite thing is that if you are willing to put in the time and the effort, you get full control of the end product, and it's almost if you're willing to sacrifice, you're able to produce the story that's in your head almost one to one. And I guess that's a sort of a way of saying that there's no budget in comics per se. There's no special effects budget. There's no environment design budget. And yeah, like I said, you can create whatever's in your head as long as you're willing to put in the time. That's my favorite thing, I think.
How does that differ from something like music or movies, or I mean, not movies, you've said movies, or like novels or
Well, as far as novels go, novels are a little too dependent on the consumer or the reader, right? Like you can only describe something a certain way. You can only describe something as best you can, no matter how good an author you are. But at the end of the day, it all depends on the reader, on what their imagination is, and how far they can actually see your vision. But with comics, it's your vision for better or for worse. You put that on paper, and it's especially for creator owned stuff like with Urban Animal. I'm super proud of the fact that I'm able to really deliver, you know at my current skill level, I'm able to deliver what I'm imagining certain scenes to be, and I take great pride in that.
uh percentage wise, how much would you say of Urban Animal on the page is what's in your head?
uh like what I imagined the scene to be, I would
Yeah.
guess ranging from 80 to 95%. I began this project with Justin in 2017. It's 2022 now. I didn't know how to color back then. I was learning to color as production was going on, and some people say, "Oh, you're such a good colorist," but like really, honestly, I was struggling that first season, and uh, through some research and checking out some European comics and really learning a lot, I was able to I got to a place where I was more comfortable with my coloring work on top of all the line work. And uh, more often than not, I'm happy with what we're able to produce.
How, as a consumer, as a reader, what do you love about comics?
What I love about the fact that I heard this quote a while back, and I'm not sure if it was about comics or if it was about fiction in general, but the fact that every genre is a language of its own. And comics itself are not a genre. Comics are a medium. Superheroes are a genre. Horror is a genre, of course. And all the other romance, comedy, all that stuff are genres, and they all have their own language. Comics, because of its very nature of two streams of information, right? Text and pictures, it's able to play with that language, uh, as far as I'm concerned, way better than film can, because you're able to enjoy an artist's singular vision.
And what made you realize you wanted to
I,
make
I
comics?
realize I realize it sounds like such an artsy fartsy answer. I'm like, oh, this guy's so pretentious and shit. But like, oh, can we curse on this thing?
Go
We
ahead.
can.
No,
I realize
I'm like, you're giving the answers, and I'm like, will people think that we practice this? I swear, guys, we didn't. This is completely off the cuff.
I
Didn't even
realize
give him questions ahead of time.
it sounds super pretentious, but that's really I live and breathe this stuff. And even when I'm not working, the all the media I consume, or most of the media I consume, are related to comics and the production of and the enjoying of comics and the deconstruction of old comics. So like even when I'm not working, the conversation is always going on in my head. Why do I like this? Why do I not like that? One of my favorite YouTube channels I love right now is something called Cartoonist Kayfabe, if you're
Yeah.
familiar with that. It's two comics creators, multi awardees in different fields, different awards, Harveys, Eisners, I believe. They just break down comics from the 70s, the 80s, and they even tackled Wizard magazine and stuff. And just listening to that show allows you to appreciate comics on a much deeper level than just the stories and just the art, but also like the production and all the personalities that clash in between, and also just the politics and the drama that go into the world of it. And I don't know, it's you'd need to really love comics, I think, to be able to appreciate something as deeply as that. So that I'm really enjoying that show.
Yeah,
What was the question again?
it's a good show. It's the standard for all comics related channels.
Yeah, indeed. My other favorite show is something called Comics Cube. Have you heard of
I think that's a good show too. I like that host like a lot.
that? He's all right.
I'm so vain. When did you realize you wanted to make comics?
um, I always loved comics, right? So my very first comic that I read was an Archie, and because I was so young, like 10 or 11 years old, it didn't seep into my brain that, oh, somebody worked on this. Like in my head, it was just like, this came out of a factory and it was already completely produced. And then they just have computers that make this and shit. And I didn't really understand that people slaved over this stuff to make it. The very first time I learned that actual effort and production by individual people went into the creation of comics was when I read Wizard number 49. And I don't know if you're a Wizard fan, but
I am. Which one was 49?
it had the very first Joe Madureira interview.
Mm.
All right, so I believe I was 12 years old. And in the article, it said that Joe Madureira worked on his first Marvel comic book when he was 16. And a lot of I had classmates who were also like into drawing Dragon Ball and all that stuff back then, and they read that article and they're like, 16, oh, that's crazy. Oh, he's only a few years older than us then at this point. And then what I was thinking was that, shit, I have 4 years to break in because I was 12 years old. That was my first thought. And not long after that, I started drawing my first comics. I didn't know how to write, and the only long form stories I knew were 80s cartoons. So I knew the Thundercats story, I knew the Thundercats origins, Silverhawks, and all that stuff. And from memory, because we didn't have YouTube back then, that would have been like, if I was 12 years old, it would have been 1992, 1993, something like that, 1996 actually. And we didn't have YouTube, so I had to plot out what I remembered of the first episode of Thundercats on a index card, and then I drew it. I drew all of it in my very first set of pencils. I had no clue how to ink yet, so there was a lot of big areas of just, this is supposed to be black, and then I just used random different shades of pencil because I didn't even know that different grades of pencil had different darkness and softness and stuff. So complete amateur trying his best to just make something. And honestly, I've never stopped since then.
How close were you to getting the Thundercats origin accurately?
Don't worry about it.
Did you
That
remember they were all
story.
naked at the start?
Yes, I changed that. I had the foresight to change that. Good thing. But I remembered I remembered enough that there was a mass exodus from original Thundera, which I hated drawing because I needed to draw a crowd scene in my very first thing that I made myself draw. And then I drew spaceships, which I hated doing because I didn't know perspective yet. And then I remembered enough of the first episode that there was an attack on the ship, right, by the mutants. This was original Thundercats from the 80s, not the Cartoon Network reboot. So the issue I drew climaxed with the mutants, the reptilians and the monkeys uh, boarding the ship in a sort of pirate attack in space. So that was fun.
Seems fun. Yeah, I remember the
I'll dig it up.
Thundercats.
I'll dig it up somewhere.
So when you started drawing, who were the main influences in your work?
So there was Joe Madureira, obviously, and I didn't take note of names until I learned that guy's name, which was one of the hardest names to remember, apparently. Um, uh, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had been unconsciously collecting pieces that I liked from fantasy novels that my brother was reading, and then I looked at all the cover credits, and they were all John Carter or Conan the Barbarian, and I didn't realize it, but I was a Frank Frazetta fan before I knew his name even, and then
Rosetta's that
uh,
kind of guy. You don't realize
yeah,
it. You don't
exactly,
realize it at
exactly.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, but once you know the name, like you can spot it from a mile away, like the side of that truck or the cover of that booklet over there. There's Frank Frazetta, Joe Madureira, Mike Mignola a little later on, and then Kevin McGuire because my brother collected a lot of the JLI stuff, and I loved how emotive his characters were. I wasn't necessarily a fan of the stories per se, but it's good stuff. Who else? Stuart Immonen is probably one of my later influences, but I've incorporated a lot of his stylistic choices and his line work into my own. And yeah, little bits and pieces here and there, mostly 90s guys, but not no none of the Image founders actually
Yeah,
made
Image
it
is my
here.
blind spot too.
I love Eric Larson though, and I love the world of Savage Dragon, but like I didn't incorporate any of that art into my stuff.
It's weird, right? Because like Image was the biggest thing. And
Yeah.
but then there are people like you and me who just missed it. Like just missed it.
Well, what's funny is the 90s was when I really became a fan because like I discovered Joe Mad, I discovered X-Men, and then like I didn't realize at the time, right? So anybody who had been collecting comics for longer than me, I didn't realize that this was bad. This was bad stuff. The stories were shit. But like that's what people are saying now about that era. And me
Oh,
being
the
12 years
90s was
old,
good, man.
listen. So the art was fantastic. Like I would be looking at my brother's Teen Titan stuff, and then I would be showing him my Uncanny X-Men. I was like, this looks better than that. Come on, get with the program. Then like, uh, I was too young to read Sandman, right, and all the mature stuff. So I had to stick with superheroes because, those were the cards that were dealt to me. And yeah, I grew up valuing the quality of the art and like uh, being told that good art, that's what sells books, not necessarily good stories. That's what got inculcated in me. And then only later on did I start actually realizing, oh shit, I'm supposed to read the words. I'm supposed to think about this stuff. I didn't even read Watchmen until I was an adult.
I didn't read
So
Watchmen until high school. So I
Mhm.
must have been like 17, maybe senior year.
I was
Um,
in college. I was in college.
yeah, how did Watchmen hit you when you read it?
I really enjoyed it, but it was also partly like I'm supposed to like this. Yeah, I'm supposed to think this is good. And for the most part, I understood why it was good. Luckily, I had not been spoiled about like the twist in the ending and stuff. Like I didn't know what was coming, and it really got me. And it I don't necessarily know if Watchmen is my favorite graphic novel or what I would consider the greatest graphic novel of all time. Like that might be blasphemous, but I don't consider it my favorite. But it definitely lit a fire under me in the sense that, oh, comics can be like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's not my favorite. I don't consider it the greatest. I think it's the best in terms of being like a comic book textbook, right? Like if you were to give it to someone, you could be like, there is a crap load of techniques here,
Hmm.
craft wise, that you can use the transitions, the lighting, the angles, the
Yeah,
structure of the story. So it feels it like I've heard some people say it feels more like a writing exercise sometimes than an actual story. Yeah. That
I would agree
that
with that.
might also sound blasphemous.
I would probably never recommend it to a first time reader though, but that's just me.
Yeah, probably not. You mean because a first time reader, you want them to have a happy ending.
Spoiler for Watchmen, guys.
I'm sorry if I spoiled a 36-year-old comic, everyone. But no, that's an interesting thing because we were talking about you were talking about good art sells books regardless of whether or not the story is good, but we're talking about comics, right? So you're
Hmm.
an artist. So how much can you really divorce the art from the story? If you were not drawing Urban Animal, if somebody
Hmm.
else was drawing Urban Animal, it's not the same story, is it?
No, it's not. Because and I'll take credit for this personally. A lot of the storytelling, I'm not gonna say all because Justin definitely contributes a lot, of course, but a lot of the storytelling happens in the art, little subtle things that are not even scripted most of the time. So there's a whole bunch of little character moments or little like special effects or creature moments that are not necessarily described, but I just decide to put it in to flesh out or like enrich the story just that little bit. And we do this little thing where in the background I try to sneak in all those Easter eggs and all those call outs to things that I enjoy just to make the world a little more rich or lived in. And you don't script that.
So tell me something, John. When you were starting out making comics, you were making your own layouts.
Mhm.
What are
12
the
years old.
12 years old, or even like later on, like
Sure.
what are the top three mistakes that beginners make?
Top three mistakes. All right. I'm not gonna point these out saying that like noobs always commit these errors, but I'm gonna bring them up because they were my mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Um, Not in any order, but I'd say the first one is violating the 180-degree rule. You familiar with that?
Yeah. So if character A is here, character B is here
Mhm.
talking, the next panel you can't switch them.
Yeah. Uh, the easy way to remember it, if you have a character reacting left, the other person should always be reacting right and never switch that around. Otherwise, you're going to confuse your reader.
Seems like such an obvious rule when you mention it, though. Like, so why
Yeah,
does anyone make that mistake at all?
mostly because they're not thinking about the space that the characters are inhabiting and they're just thinking about the interaction themselves or making the characters look cool. It's boring, honestly. It's boring to think about this character should always be facing left, this character should always be facing right, because if you're a new artist, you want to make every panel as dynamic and as flashy as can be, but like at the end of the day, in service of the story, you have to always make it clear who is speaking and who is listening, or who is acting and who is reacting. And that's not sexy, you know.
How does okay, anyway, more mistakes.
More mistakes. Another one, the second one would probably be changing your light source. For pencilers and inkers specifically, this is a common mistake. I made this mistake. Uh, I was working on a thing where there was only one candle in there's one candle in the room, and the characters were acting around it. And you know, it can be argued that it's not necessarily a mistake, but like if you change the shadows too much, it creates an inconsistency or an incongruence in the story that can make it confusing. But if you have some creative license, if you're willing to take some creative license and say that I had to imagine a light source other than this candle just to make the story clearer, that can be forgiven. So I guess, yeah, you need to learn when to take that creative license. And then third mistake that rookies or beginning artists make a lot is not varying your shots, I think.
Mm. Mhm.
Too many people, it can be argued again that this works for some stories and not for others, but like, if all your shots are taken in the same distance, all medium length or all close-ups or all far away shots, it creates a boring page. And you need to think of the page itself as a single piece of work. And if all your characters are the same size, it's a little static, it's a little flat. Look up, for new artists, look up Wallywood's shots that always work, and I'm sure you're gonna get a lot of ideas from that.
There are 22 of them, people. They always
Yep.
work.
I
Yeah.
actually forgot how many there were.
But I mean that is interesting because like I think a lot of people we're talking about the 90s, so like we're talking a lot of splash pages or
Hmm.
big money shots, right? And I think there was definitely some extremes in the 90s where people were just doing big money shot after big money shot after big money shot
Yeah.
to the point where it was meaningless.
Well, it certainly sold a lot of books, right?
Because the art sells books.
Yeah, it sells books. Like I said, there was definitely no shortage of good art in the 90s. But if you were a comic fan looking for a good story with some depth and some characters and some, meaningful stories, I don't know. I don't necessarily know that Image was the place to go for that stuff. Not even Marvel, really, because, yeah, all my love to Marvel and DC, I respect the houses, but like, you had like Lobdell and Nicieza not necessarily delivering the deepest of stories, right? Much respect to them, but if you wanted a rich story back then, you would need to find a way to get some Vertigo books.
Yeah, I think DC was the best written publisher back then.
Hmm.
But
I agree.
the trade-off was that they didn't have the flashiest artists. Like they had really
No.
clean storytellers,
Hmm.
right? But not the types of artists that would draw you to a book
Until Alex Ross came
until Alex Ross came in. But then
in.
even then, like he did what?
It's
Two
Kingdom
books.
Come. Four issues of Kingdom Come, really. That's it.
That's about it. So you know, how much of comics is you understanding things like anatomy or perspective structure? How much of that can you cheat?
Uh I was that weird kid who wanted to learn everything, right? Like I said, I was 12 years old when I actually started taking this shit seriously, and I collected Wizard magazine. So I started studying perspective when I was like 13 years old. By the time I was 13, 14, I could do single, double, and 3-point perspective like very easily. So you can cheat that uh, to some extent, because really
Did you
nobody's
just say
gonna.
that at 13 you could do 3-point perspective easily?
Yes, sir. I was that kid. I was
It's
that kid.
amazing, John.
You'd never guess it, but from the monkeys that I draw in my comic book. But like, I genuinely cared about that stuff. But as far as cheating in your art, uh, you're asking me what you can get away with, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Um, you can get away with any amount of magic or hackery in your art. You can get away with that as long as something else more flashy is going on in the page or in the panel. Like, uh, I'll I believe I've told you this before, and I've certainly made no secret of it among my peers. But there are several panels in Urban Animal that are recycled. I will have the same face in season 4 taken from season 3, just change the light source or something like that, and nobody notices most of the time. And there's even some repeated backgrounds, some buildings that have just been shifted just a teeny tiny bit, And as long as it's not the focus of that panel, I feel comfortable doing that. How to get away with it is to make sure that there's something more important happening.
It's the advantage of going digital, though, right?
Exactly.
Recycling is
Yeah.
easier. So
Hmm.
when you were working analog, can you walk me through what your process used to be?
Oh, my process was the very basic, laid out on, I believe it was a 3 by 4 sketch, and then just blow that up in, once you scan it, and then like send that to your writer or your editor, get that approved, and then just I never worked on full size 11 by 17 when I was working analog. So I was working traditional from 2008 up until 2015, 16, right around that era. And then I shifted to digital with 1 week in the library for Image Comics. And then that made things just so much easier for me. But as far as my traditional process, it was just the basic thumbnail, ink on, like I said, not 11 by 17, but certainly the same proportions. And then the biggest part of the process was just hating everything and everyone, because I hated scanning. I hated erasing my pencils. I hated all of that stuff, honestly.
So talk me through the pain of having freshly inked the page and then having to erase the pencil lines right after.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. Well, I'm lucky that I'm not one of those artists who like to bear down on the page with the graphite, right? I never created like super dark grooves with the pencils and stuff, but like just the repetition of it, it's just not what's the word? Not conducive to just doing every day. It didn't lend itself well to, maintaining a good state of mind. I felt like I was a robot more than anything. I hated it, really. Um,
So you would draw very loosely and then ink over it.
yeah, I would basically just do rough sketches, rough pencils, and never take it to tight pencils, and I would just ink over that. And I don't consider myself a good inker, but I know I can read my rough pencils very well, if that makes sense. So like I'm confident enough in my inks that I can ink over super rough pencils.
If you were to do that, like how much of the inking, uh so basically you're skipping a big step by not putting in really detailed pencils
Yeah,
in
yeah.
that sense. So how much of the inking for you, um how much of that, because I've always heard, like, a lot of people have been telling me that inking is actually the easiest of among the three jobs: penciling, inking, and coloring.
Yeah, it's like doing the dishes. You don't need to think about it.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah. Um
Even if you
I
even if you didn't have like really tight pencils, you don't have to think about it.
uh Yeah, they were rough pencils, but not so rough that they were just like gestural. I would know that this was a clothed man in a Victorian setting. It would be tight enough for me to ink, but certainly not tight enough for somebody else to ink, if that makes any sense.
How much of that is about repetition? Like the fact that at that point in time, 2008, you have
Hmm.
already inked yourself, in practice
Hmm.
for what, 14 years at that point, 12,
Um,
or
Thereabouts, right?
yeah. So like
If
how
I,
much
if
of that, like would a newer artist just starting out be
mhm.
able to just draw something and then very roughly and then pick up a pen or a brush and then start inking himself?
Mind you, I wasn't published yet. I was first published around I want to say 2010, 2011. But like I started working professionally. I started getting paid to make comics in 2008. Your question is how much of that is just repetition? I don't necessarily know if it was repetition, because I was drawing pitches left and right, just trying to get a series. So uh, if you're just drawing first issues of everything, you don't really get into enough of a rhythm to really build uh, enough muscle memory to call it repetition. Um, uh, I would say part of it is confidence, and the other big part of it is just um, not caring. You just don't care. You just want to get the job done. I guess I wasn't necessarily
The
uh,
opposite of confidence.
Just sheer callous hubris. We call it hubris.
I'm
Um,
confident enough in my work, and by the way, if it's not good enough, screw it.
I don't want to say I didn't care. I'm not, that's the wrong way to phrase it. Tiffany, cut that out. Cut that out of the edit. Uh, I'll say uh, I care. Of course, I wanted it to look good, but at the same time, I knew that I wasn't the best artist around. And even though I admired great inkers like Ed, I knew that I wasn't gonna be the next Joe Mad, right? I knew that I wasn't gonna be the next Jim Lee. Like I just wanted it to look like it was me doing it. So screw it. Just just put pen to paper and just start rocking. And certainly I've improved since then, but uh even back then, I cared more about making the art look like me than trying to even be a Joe Mad clone or a Stuart Immonen clone. So I didn't really have that hang up of, because I feel like, and I realize I'm taking a long time with this answer. I
Take as much
feel
time as you need.
I feel like for young artists especially, what slows them down is self-doubt, and self-doubt comes from this personalized standard of like I have to look as good as this guy who I really like. And no, you don't. you know you're never going to be that guy, but he's also never going to be you. So just do it the best that you can you know
You know why I quit drawing when I was like 10? Because I wanted to be George Perez.
oh, oh man, that's a tall order.
I was like, if I can't draw like George Perez, I don't want to draw at all.
Oh man.
Uh,
You should chat with my brother. He's a big George Perez fan.
so let me ask you, I've got a theory, and I don't know
Hmm.
how true this theory is, right? Um, and this has nothing to do with the skill level of an artist, but I think that there are artists that are easier to clone than others, right? You could create a Jim Lee clone, and I think we've already seen some. You can't create a Joe Mad clone.
We've seen some.
We have?
Roger Cruz,
Well,
arguably, he's a
I
Joe
think
Mad
he's
clone.
what, 60% there? I don't. Fine,
um,
blow a hole in my theory.
well, look, okay, let's follow this. Why don't you think Joe Mad is easy to clone?
Just go backwards. I think Jim Lee is easy to clone because Jim Lee
Hmm.
follows a certain set of rules, right? Like a
Hmm.
certain set of proportions, a certain set of a certain level of detail.
There's more of a
Um,
system.
there's more of a system, and Joe
Hmm.
Mads is more. However, he chooses what he exaggerates on the page. Only Joe Mad knows.
Yeah, I would agree with that actually, and we can take it a step further, and we can say like the hardest artists to clone are the ones who are very less inclined to follow a system and more inclined to follow a feeling, which you can't necessarily uh, emulate if you're trying to clone him. Which is why Eric Canetti is almost impossible to clone because his artwork is almost purely energy. You can't imagine what Canetti is gonna do next. You can't emulate that, but you don't. If you tell Canetti to draw Grifter, or let's say you request that Jim Lee draw Grifter, you sort of know what he's gonna do. But if you do Canetti, hand him a Grifter project, you're kind of lost in the woods as far as exactly what he's gonna output. In that same sense, other artists who um, have more energy than system, not to knock on Jim Lee, of course, but you've got Daniel Warren Johnson, who's really difficult to clone, I feel. James Herron also. So to some extent, I think your theory has holds some water. It's not perfect.
Yeah, I came up with a theory when I thought why we've seen a lot of Kirby clones and we've never
Hmm.
seen a Steve Ditko clone.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see
And
that.
I think it's
Or
because
Steranko.
Yeah, I think it's because Kirby has a lot of like it looks like feeling, but there's a system, right? Like
Yeah,
here's my big giant hand and whatnot. But
yeah,
Ditko is more like I don't know what lines on his face we're gonna draw today. It's just
yeah.
I don't know what angle his body's gonna be in today. Let's just run with it.
I guess it
Uh,
breaks it down, right? It breaks it down to two schools of artists, like artists who follow a system and artists who follow a feeling or an energy. And one is easier to learn, certainly. And because it's easier to learn, it's easier to emulate and easier to clone. Um, the other is hard to learn, but it doesn't sell as much, I feel. It's harder to process, if
yeah,
that
I
makes any
I
sense.
think that a huge reason why Joe Mad sold as much as he did was because he was like the counter programming to somebody like Jim Lee.
Yeah, yeah. That's very possible.
Yeah, because like for anyone who wanted something new from the Jim Lee school, there was
Mhm.
Joe Mad. The other
Yeah.
guy that I think is really hard to clone, and I think his imitators have proven that he's hard to clone, is Rob Liefeld. Because
I
he gets a bad rap, but I think a lot of
yeah.
it is because of his imitators.
Much respect to Rob actually. The easy joke is that he can't draw feet, and but like nobody nobody is more discussed in most water coolers around water coolers than Rob Liefeld in most comic shops. So, he
John,
certainly left an impression.
do you like drawing feet?
Uh Not my favorite. Not my favorite.
If you can
But
hide them in a panel, wouldn't you?
it depends also. I like drawing dinosaur feet, if that makes any sense.
Is it easier?
They are easier actually because like nobody cares if a dinosaur's foot is ugly.
So you mean you're talking about you talk about like how an artist needs to know all of these certain things and how you were the type of person who wanted to learn everything. But like,
Yeah.
the construction of a human body, for example, like the hand,
Yeah.
like how much of that is just natural to you at this point, having drawn for like so many years, and how much of it is still like, oh god damn it, I gotta draw a hand.
Uh, Most of it is I'm pretty good at drawing hands. I'm not the best at it, but I still do the cartoony like sausage fingers because that's just the way I draw hands, right? Um, Feet are harder. Uh, my anatomy is always going to be cartoony because
Yeah.
that's just the kind of characters I like to draw. Um, Tech is always going to be a weakness of mine, I feel, because even back then I tried to get good at robots and technology and stuff. I can do it. It's just not to the level I would like it to be at,
It's
but
not
I'm
to the
working on it.
level that you draw animals.
Certainly not. I'm more confident drawing animals and creatures.
How much of that is because like I don't know the answer to this. How much of that is because of just the varying interest levels? You like animals, you may not like tech.
Oh, I love I love mecha. Like my favorite
Oh,
anime is
really?
Evangelion.
Okay.
And well, granted, the mecha and Evangelion are not necessarily your standard robot fare. They're a little more organic, they're a little more sleek. But and I love Akira, and there's no shortage of tech there. um I honestly have just not have I haven't had the opportunity to get good at it because I just haven't worked on a project that required me to do it. Like when we started Urban Animal, I wasn't great at drawing animals. It was like we were midway through season one when I realized, oh shit, I need to learn how to draw a different animal every episode. And that was super daunting to me. And
Isn't this your
if you look
concept?
if you look at season one, those rats are fucking whack, dude. They look terrible. Jesus Christ. They look like fat hamsters. They're supposed to be
See,
rats.
this is why all of you artists are so hard on yourself. I guarantee you most people don't even know what you're talking about.
And then uh, I was having a conversation with Justin, right? Justin Jordan, co-creator of Urban Animal. And she's like, Justin, whose idea was it to create a character who just breaks down into 100 rats? Because somebody's gonna need to draw 100 rats. He's like, it was you, John. God damn it. Can we change the character? It was too late. We had already written so.
So let me segue that into my next question, which is
Mhm.
when you moved into digital, is it easier to draw 100 rats?
It's easier to copy paste the 100 rats. It's not necessarily easy to it's not much easier to make them all look good. So there are certainly little hacks and techniques so that you don't need to create every outline of every single rat. Like I said, there's the copy pasting technique also. There's the other technique where you just create the general shape of the rat and use Photoshop to create the outline. Um, it, I'll tell you what's easier. It's easier to reference when you're working digitally because you can hold the image literally just side by side, or use it as an underdrawing.
Trace.
Sure. Trace over it, steal from the best.
Yeah.
Google is your friend.
What do you feel about people who say like artists shouldn't trace? Because I think they're full of shit.
The people who say that artists shouldn't trace are people who have never had to deal with a deadline.
You know, the thing is, like, I think tracing is completely legitimate, and because you still have to make it look good, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I
did you?
mean, there's
Yeah,
a difference between tracing from a reference and tracing from another artist. The other one I look down on a little
yeah,
bit
of
more.
course,
I
of course.
understand it, but I look down on it a little bit more. But tracing from a photograph or from a movie still, that's totally fine.
Have you ever seen that cover of Doom 2099 with Mount Rushmore?
Mm-mm.
You know what? I'm gonna go show it to you.
I think I was out of comics around that time.
All right, let me show you what it looks like. Uh, there it is. And I think this goes to show just how powerful, like how you still have to be a really good artist in order to trace properly. So the idea is that Doom has carved his face into Mount Rushmore,
I'm
right?
sorry, where are you sending it to me?
I am sharing my screen like right
Oh.
now. So the idea is that Doom has carved his face into Mount Rushmore,
Ooh, I see it.
right? I mean, but look at the detail on all of those. He clearly traced that. And
Yeah.
then he added in Doom, which has like almost no detail whatsoever. So it
Yeah,
looks like a completely different drawing.
it does.
So anyway, that's my point.
Who is this? Who drew this?
Um, the artist of this was
What's his name? Where does he live?
cover. I don't know, John. Well, the artist of the thing was Pat Broderick. I don't know who did the cover. Oh yeah, it is Pat
Yeah,
Broderick.
it's not a bad example, but as far as tracing goes, I understand it. And like I said, the people who complain about it or bitch about it have never had to deal with a tight deadline.
And
Why did you
then
laugh? Why did you laugh when I pointed that out? Did you have somebody in mind specifically?
no, not at all. Like because I think sometimes like I look at what fans have to complain about, right? Being a fan
Hmm.
myself. And the thing is I think that a lot of fans don't consider things other than the art, right? So
Yeah,
like I was talking to a couple of the guys who I was talking to Jamal Eigel and Dan Panosian, who
name
are
drop.
who are doing the art for two of the Scott Snyder comiXology books, right?
Hmm.
And then they were talking about how they couldn't really believe that Scott Snyder has this new line where he's writing 8 books and he has kids and a wife and family.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, fans never think of that stuff, right? Fans never think
yeah.
about the fact that you have to make a deadline. Fans never think about the fact that, your hand might be tired, you know?
Or like just most fans are like, if you're supposed to create 8 panels a day, which I'm supposed to on Urban Animal, like sometimes I don't know how to draw a fucking ostrich, right? Sometimes I gotta take the time to learn how to draw that shit. And if I don't have enough time, I will, hunt for a photograph on Google Images and then trace over that. That's it.
you're gonna take the shortcut. Yeah. Why
Hmm.
wouldn't you? Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And I defy you to like find the original photograph of that ostrich. I challenge you because I made it different enough and I colored it a different way. It doesn't listen, maybe this is gonna age poorly, but I don't think anybody's gonna find it.
Talk to me about the advantages and disadvantages of going digital.
Uh you're faster. That's the giant advantage. But the giant disadvantage is you miss out on a aftermarket of selling original art. Um, that is, I am lucky enough to be represented by Jason Schachter over at Essential Sequential, and I almost never have traditional art to sell to his chagrin. And it's unfortunate, but every now and then I'll do a piece and then I course it through him. Um, but really, I would say that's the biggest disadvantage of not working traditionally. If you are fast enough and if you're talented enough, I certainly suggest being being good at both if you can manage it.
How do you make up that lost income?
Just working my ass off and like doing as much digital projects as I can because I hardly ever have time to work traditionally these days. Urban Animal takes up 75 to 80% of my time, and every now and then I'm able to sneak in a cover commission or like a small 8 to 15 pager like I did for Budget a couple of years ago
Yeah,
for Trece.
for
And
Bloodlines.
yeah, is that what it's called? I don't know the name of the book. I don't think it's out yet. I have no doubt that when the Bloodlines book that I appear in comes out, Budget won't shut up about it.
Well, he
He's very,
plugs everything Trece, so I don't.
that's true. That's true. I'd love to do more. That world is super fascinating and like just the general mood of it. It requires me to draw in a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like working on Urban Animal for 5 6 years now, I've had to like bake bake the world into my head of like this is what nighttime in this world looks like. This is what afternoon city color scheme looks like. But like in Trece where it's black and white, I'm able to stretch different muscles that I didn't get to play around with before. So it's fun.
What's the like? How does your thought process change exactly when something can be colored versus when something is in black and white?
Um,
Versus,
I'm
I suppose, when something is originally in black and white but might be colored down the line.
yeah. I'm gonna try to backtrack to answer that properly, right? So with Urban Animal, where I have full control of the colors and stuff, the story can get dark, but the thing with Urban Animal, right, is that the shadows are never black. Does that make sense? Like I don't know if you yourself have looked at or studied the art enough, but like even when the mood of the scene in Urban Animal gets really violent or dark, I never use black shadows. But in Trece, I feel like you could and it would work. Because of course, aside from the fact that it's black and white, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't use gray, right? But like in Trece, you're able to cast darker shadows. Oh, look at that. It's like a pull quote. But you're able to actually do darker shadows and Trece, and it works within the context of the story. Urban Animal, not so much.
So yeah, an urban animal, like a lot of it is driven by the color, I would
Mm-hmm.
say.
Yeah.
And does that change your general approach? Like
Um. y-
even just to drawing a panel, right? Even just to drawing a
yeah.
panel, like does it
It
change it?
hasn't. It hasn't necessarily changed my approach to it panel per panel. It's changed my approach to storytelling on a arc sense because like season two, for example. I don't know how far you've gotten as far as your reading, but like
I finished it.
season. Oh, excellent! So you're caught up with like season 4 and 5.
Season 4.
Five just started,
5
but
just
like
started.
see.
I'll get to it eventually.
All right. So season two is with the witches, right?
Yeah.
Season two is with the devourers, the witches. And I knew, because when Justin and I were plotting, we knew exactly what was going to happen in the end. I knew that the last scene was going to use a lot of a certain color, like a lot of that magenta and a lot of that neon green. So I made, as far as planning goes, I made a conscious effort to never use those colors in the earlier parts of the season. So to answer your question, it's changed my way of thinking as far as like being able to tell the passage of time or delineate the story beats just using color. And that same technique is used in the later seasons as well. Like we don't, it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule like never use this color, but if you look at every season, you can tell that there's a dominant uh flavor, so to speak, to every season.
There's an advantage to going digital too. You're not going to run out of colors.
And the advantage of doing everything yourself art wise.
Yeah. Okay. So of course there is the assembly line structure of comics, right? And we've
Yeah.
seen that a lot of the time, especially in the 80s to maybe the mid 90s. Color was pretty much an afterthought.
Oh, I don't know necessarily afterthought, but it wasn't the forefront. It wasn't in the planning stage.
Right. It had to look good in black and white first, and then definitely then you can put the color in. Maybe sometimes you'd get a colorist who would actually color it really well, and sometimes
Yeah,
you'd get a colorist who would just, fill in the red and the blues on Superman. But
right.
so not necessarily just in your work, but just in general, how much of that do you think has changed in the comics industry, in the comics world in the last 15 or so years?
Uh,
Because right now, like now I'm not even thinking that there are superstar inkers, like maybe there are a
yeah,
few, but definitely not before. Like before, Todd McFarlane was a superstar inker.
yeah. I don't necessarily know that colorists on comic books are enough to sell the book. I don't necessarily know that, but I don't follow all the comics either. So I don't know what the top selling books are even. But I will say this. There are a lot more all around artists, people who produce all their own line work and all their own color work. And that has it's almost become a norm at this point, especially for the newer artists. Like uh a lot of the 90s guys are just pencilers or just inkers or just colorists, right? And much respect to them, but I think we're gonna shift. The industry, I think, is gonna shift in such a way that there's gonna be a lot more artists that just do everything themselves, as far as art goes. And um for better or for worse, it's an exciting venture, for sure. I don't necessarily know that the stories will be good if it's all just artists doing their own stories, but like, um, look at Mike Mignola though, you know, he's able to write and he's able to draw his own thing. And one of my biggest influences as far as color goes is Dave Stewart, and
Yeah, it's amazing.
I study his stuff to no end. And what's interesting about that is that it came out, of course, in physical books, but that stuff looks amazing digitally. When you read it digital, the colors just pop.
Yeah.
And
Dave's
Hellboy
so
is,
good.
yeah, and Hellboy is a certain red that the physical Hellboy books are never going to be as red as on a screen. And I feel like that's how red he's supposed to be.
What is the thought process now when you're doing layouts for webtoon, which is an infinite scroll,
Yeah.
knowing that it's going to eventually get put in print?
Yeah, that's tough, right? Because like it's counterintuitive. You can't plan for the other without sacrificing the former. Um, Honestly, our priority is to make the webtoon look good. And we I try to create these shots that are able to be recycled later on for splash pages, but at the end of the day, the priority will always be to make the webtoon look good, to create panels that flow smoothly together. I Webtoon trusts us enough at this point that we don't need to send them approvals. 4 or 5 years into working with them, they trust us that we know how to make the story flow, we know how to make it smooth. Uh, I just try my very best to tell a smooth story, and using the time that I have to create a panel that I can work on for 1 2 hours and then just bang it out onto the next one.
Will Eisner popularized the splash page with the spirit section in the 40s. And the
Mhm.
reason that he was able to do that, come up with those really innovative splash pages, was because, in his own words, he only had 8 pages to tell the story. So he had to catch your eye and he had to tell a story within the splash page. So, in other words, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
What are the types of innovations that you have discovered given this new format, the Infinite Scroll?
Okay. The really easy one is being able to do. There's this thing in animation, right, where the prime example of it is in the Batman animated series opening sequence, where you have a camera that seems to be scrolling up, and the view is from a street scene. But as the camera pans up, you are able to view a building, uh, sort of like an isometric view, sort of like, in a strange perspective. The cool thing about Webtoon, one of the three that you're requesting, is that you're able to sort of do that and fake that camera tilt as you're scrolling down. So you're able to, if you're willing to create a long enough panel, you're able to create a city shot in the distance, and then you scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, and you're able to, like, it's like an aerial view of a highway. You know,
Yeah.
I'm probably not describing that very well,
No,
but I'll
I
send you an
get you.
example.
No, I get you. But if you want to send me an example that I could put over this so people can
Yeah.
see.
We'll do that. Another innovation, I would say, or like a unique thing that we do with Webtoon is being able to use gutters to change the general mood of a scene. Like if you're reading a standard comic book, more often than not, the gutter or the space in between the panels is going to be white, right? Or if you're reading an image book, it's going to be black. Or if you're reading a 90s image book, there are no gutters because all the panels are overlapping. But with Webtoon,
The
fun.
shade.
I love that stuff though. But like with Webtoon, one fun thing I do is I change the gutter color depending on the general mood of a scene. So it's a scary scene, it's all black. For a lighthearted scene, it's like sky blue. And then because I'm able to put distance, infinite distance between the panels, I'm able to gradient between black to sky blue to dictate either the passage of time or the change of emotion in between the scenes. So I'm sort of like, I'm spoon feeding the reader. You're supposed to feel this way here, you know? So I'm holding his hand. And I guess the third
And
one,
that is the necessity thing, because it would look boring if it was just plain white.
yeah, true.
Yeah.
And it's also it's also a necessity in the sense that our word balloons don't have outlines. We went for a very European feel. I forget where I saw that first, but we made a conscious effort to use a very European comic font and no outlines in the word balloons just to make it feel like bande dessinée. And I think the third one, hmm,
Well,
I'm gonna cheat.
go
I'm gonna
ahead.
cheat and say that the third one is getting immediate feedback from the fans, because on a weekly basis, if you get all the positives and all the people cheering you on every week, it can't be beat compared to comics where you're slaving away for months in advance and you don't even know if your book's gonna come out. And when it comes out, you don't even know if people are gonna like it. Compare that to getting weekly validation from people who genuinely love your work. That's a giant advantage for me.
And
And
like, it's not even a letters page. It's just like a line.
yeah.
Kagan, good girl.
There's some weirdos. There's some weirdos for sure, but like they took the time to read, they took the time to comment. We have a couple of readers who are in the fast pass episodes, right? They paid to read in advance. All they do is complain. This sucks. Why is this happening? It feels rushed, but they've been reading since season two, since season one, since the beginning, really. But like, if you're reading our books and you're actually putting thought into it, man, complain all you want, dude. We appreciate it,
You can't hate it as much as you say you do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They're just passionate.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And also like the weekly validation is it must feel good for you, right? It
Yeah,
it it
for
must
sure.
it's automatically like it's automatically there keeping you going.
Yeah,
Do you ever change
exactly.
the plot line or do you ever change your approach based on comments?
Not really. We have we've done minor tweaks to storylines, but as far as personalities, all the characters have remained fairly unchanged, and all the actions that their strong personalities, um, you know, how do I say this? The storylines that would have sprouted from their personalities are still the storylines that are being followed now. So no major changes on that front.
John, what is Webtoon like as a publisher?
Webtoon can be what's the word for it? It can be a bit of a grind. I'm gonna be completely honest. You're certainly in the trenches, and of course you are. If you are delivering, in our case, a 40-page web strip, a 40-page comic strip every week, which gives you 5 days to create 8 panels a day, completely colored by yourself. Of course, that's going to be a grind. It's not easy. There's certain sacrifices, but you get to you get to enjoy being on a platform that is being viewed and read and enjoyed by literally millions of people. You know, just the sheer number of eyeballs is dwarfs the physical comics readership. You know, and it all depends on ultimately how you feel about it, how you feel about that sort of grind and that sort of work. It all depends on what your plan is, what you want at the end of the day. If you're just doing a story just to do a story, just to get a paycheck, it might not be worth it, especially if you don't believe in the story you're working on. But if you are working to enrich an IP and establish a fan base for your IP with the hopes and plans of maybe something bigger, it is well worth it to start. You can certainly do a lot worse than starting with Webtoon.
What does a Justin Jordan script look like for Urban Animal? Like what does it look like every week?
Back in season one, he uh, I don't want this to I don't want to make it sound like he shortens the scripts now, but I like to think that because of our working relationship, he certainly trusts me more at this point. Back in season one, he would describe every panel a little bit more vividly, as if it was an artist just that had nothing to do with the project, or an artist who didn't really know the characters very well. But as early as season two, Justin began adopting this thing. I believe I told you about it. He would do like, so John, in this shot, Charlotte is doing a Charlotte thing with no description, as to what she's actually doing, and immediately within the context of the scene and what the dialogue is saying, I know exactly what Charlotte needs to do. And uh, Justin is a very generous writer in the sense that he will write a scene that he will describe the feeling and the mood of the scene just enough that I know what I need to do. And then as long as we get to as long as we get from point A to point B, he doesn't he's not fussy about what the mid actions are to get there, as long as it looks good, of course. And like, yeah, he's generous in that sense, and he's not finicky.
John, can you tell any of our aspiring artists what type of digital tools you use, and if anything, like what they should invest in?
Aspiring artists, I use a program called Clip Studio Paint. Urban Animal season 1 to 4 were all done on Manga Studio, which was the previous version of CSP. And I just recently started learning CSP for season 5. Um, I believe they've come under fire recently because they have changed their subscription plans, or like they've increased their version rates or whatever. But like, don't ask me about that. Check out their website. But I can vouch for the program. It's very good. It's very intuitive. It's very robust. It feels less clunky than Photoshop. Honestly, Photoshop is probably more powerful in the sense that it can actually do video editing, but Clip Studio Paint just feels it feels like a it feels like a scalpel if what you really want to do is comics. Um, uh, by comparison, Photoshop is a chainsaw and Clip Studio Paint is a scalpel. As far as hardware, I use an Intuos 5. I do not draw on an iPad or a monitor tablet because I just don't like that many screens pointing at me at the same time. So I draw on one of these old school tablets where you don't look at your hand and you just look at the screen. And that's worked for me thus far.
What is the learning curve on a thing like that?
It took me about a month to get really comfortable with it because I was shifting from traditional to this, right? But I gave myself I started a daily project where I would draw one thing and post it online, and that forced me to get good real quick. So learning curve, if you're really serious about it, you can probably get good in like 2 weeks. It took me a month though.
What is the value of getting that type of feedback from followers or even from people, in your life?
Hmm.
Yeah, so
it
you'd post it,
um
yeah.
it varies, right? If you are commenting on the weekly webtoon and saying it's good and saying that you enjoy it, that has great value. Oh, I just saw a comment recently about from a ex-soldier who just came back from tour of duty. He didn't say where, or she didn't say where, and they left the military, and then they started season 1, went off to on their tour, and then came back and has 3 seasons to catch up on. And they said they still enjoyed it, and that's super meaningful to me in the sense that this person, despite going through a lot of things in their lives, came back to our story and it means something to them. So of course that has real value to me. As far as like art and like commentary on my art per se, I of course I will I take joy in fan interaction and people who say that the art is good. But as far as people who give feedback on the art or commentate on the quality of the art, I tend to only value, and this is me being a snob maybe, I tend to only value critique from other artists, not you know anybody else.
Why do you think it is that that certain fans or certain comics critics don't, how do I put this? Like like maybe overvalue the writer of a comic and not value enough the artist of a comic. Do you think it's a, in my mind, it's a misunderstanding of how comics works, right? Like they just see the artist as a hired hand. But what do you think it is?
I think they just don't understand. I think they just don't know how it works. Is that the answer you were looking for? Because like, I know that's a short answer, but I honestly think it's a criticism that comes from a place of ignorance. Um, people who people who say that your art doesn't fit this project, and the writing is carrying the writing is suffering because of your art, or the writing is carrying the series despite your art. Really, they don't really understand the collaboration process, or the it's not like there's only two people working on a book, really, especially if it's a Marvel or DC book. This guy didn't just walk into that studio and say that I'm gonna draw this now and you can't do anything about it. Somebody had to approve that, right? Somebody chose that artist, and somebody chooses that artist every month, and that's why he's still on that book, and that's why you're still there complaining about it. Maybe those two just work good together, and the writer actually thinks that. I can't speak to every comic relationship, of course, of like, or every duo, problematic or not, but I genuinely think people who complain about that sort of thing are speaking up from a place of ignorance most of the time.
John, what else can we expect from Urban Animal in season 5? Is this the last season?
This is I'm not gonna say it's the last season, but I will say it's the last story arc. And there is a very strong chance that it's going to be split in between two seasons.
Ah, you're doing that Attack on Titan thing.
Yeah, I was trying not to go there, but like sort of.
Hmm.
And we don't necessarily know even that the split is going to be significant if it's going to be a season break. We might just do the whole thing as one big mega season. What to expect? Expect a lot of casualties. I think this is where you will see Justin's Whedon side in the
Oh
good sense.
man. No, no, no. Yeah, I'm hoping it's yeah, I'm gonna go with a good sense. Let's
In
let's
the
not
good
go
sense.
there. Let's not go
But
there.
yeah.
Let's not go there.
Mhm. We took like a month of chatting back and forth, deciding exactly who was gonna bite it. And there was some back and forth. I'll say
Oh
that.
man.
There was some back and forth for sure.
Well, I know there's exactly one character who, if you kill off, all your fans are gonna go crazy.
Oh no. We've miscalculated then. We've made a huge mistake.
Exactly one character. You're not supposed to touch her, John.
Mhm. No promises. No promises.
I would rather be surprised. Okay, so Urban Animal might so we will see, the weed inside in a good sense, the
Mhm.
casualties, and good luck with that.
Thank you.
Good luck drawing all of that.
Oh man, you have no idea.
Is there anything else you want to add, John?
I think we're good. That was a good chat, man.
Good chat. Thank you so much, John. John Amor, Urban Animal. Go to Webtoon, search Urban Animal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John.